Alright, so as Democrats are continuing with the January 6th committee hearings and basically trying to portray pro-Trump Republicans as the single greatest threat to whatever semblance of democracy that we have left here in the United States, they're simultaneously behind the scenes going out and running advertisements and aiding a lot of pro-Trump Republicans in their primary contests. So here from the New York Times, they say Democrats' risky bet, aid GOP extremists in the spring, hoping to beat them in the fall. So a little bit of details here on this. They say even as national Democrats set off alarms about the threats posed by far-right Republican candidates, their campaign partners are pursuing an enormously risky strategy, promoting some of those same far-right candidates in GOP primaries in hopes that they will be easier to beat in November. And they say these efforts starkest in the Central Valley of California, where a Democratic campaign ad lashed Representative David Valadao, a Republican, for voting to impeach Donald Trump. They're running advertisements. I'm going to show you it here in a second, but they are running advertisements attacking some of the very few Republicans who actually voted to impeach Donald Trump for basically doing a light coup on the United States government. So absolutely fucking insane, especially obviously contrasted with the narrative that they are trying to run with, which I think is an accurate narrative that a lot of these pro-Trump Republicans are legitimately a threat to the country, but they're running advertisements in favor of them. And they say that they have prompted angry finger-pointing and a debate within the party over the perils and wisdom of the strategy, especially in the middle of the January 6th committee hearings on the Capitol attack. And they say the concern is obvious in a year where soaring gas prices and disorienting inflation have crushed President Biden's approval ratings. Republican candidates whom Democrats may deem unelectable could well win on the basis of their party affiliation alone. So, I've been saying this since basically this strategy was rolled out. This is an article from back in like mid-June, so like almost a month and a half ago at this point, but this is like the same exact goddamn strategy that we saw from Hillary Clinton back when she was trying to promote Donald Trump in the 2016 Republican primaries, because she thought that he was going to be the easiest candidate to beat, and what do you know, it turns out that he absolutely clobbered her. Obviously she won the popular vote, but still Donald Trump was definitely not the weakest candidate in the field of those Republican candidates that were running in the 2016 primary. But I want to jump back to this advertisement that they were talking about here against this guy David Valadao. So let's go ahead and watch this clip. So this is literally an advertisement, okay, rolled out by the House Majority PAC, okay, the Democratic Majority Advertisement PAC.
Same label, so Republicans gotta check the ingredients. David Valadao claims he's Republican. Yet, David Valadao voted to impeach President Trump. Yeah, Valadao voted to impeach Trump. And Republican GHRIS Matisse, a true conservative, 100% pro-Trump and proud. Pro-Trump Republican GHRIS Matisse, military veteran, local businessman. Or politician David Valadao, who voted to impeach Trump. Republicans, it's time to decide. House Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this ad. Come on.
They're literally running advertisements trying to say that it is a good thing. They're trying to normalize the idea that a Republican candidate should be 100% in fealty to Donald Trump and should not have voted to impeach him in the wake of the January 6th insurrection attempt. So, here's your Democratic Party for you. You have Nancy Pelosi going out and saying, we need a strong Republican Party. You need to take it back from the lunatics who have hijacked it. And meanwhile, they are literally running advertisements to help the pro-Trump insurrectionist Republicans and hurt one of the very few House Republicans who actually voted to impeach Donald Trump. Absolutely fucking wild. Just a blatant contradiction compared to what they're trying to say is the greatest threat to the country. And, some of these people obviously could be easier candidates for Democrats to beat come November, but some of them are also going to win their elections. Some of them are going to make it through and beat Democrats, largely because Joe Biden and the Democratic Party more broadly, especially the establishment of the Democratic Party, is wildly unpopular right now. So, obvious example of shooting yourself in the foot. But again, this is something that we saw as a strategy by the Hillary Clinton campaign. So let's read a couple details about that. They say here from Salon, an email recently released by whistleblowing organization WikiLeaks shows how the Clinton campaign and Democratic Party bear direct responsibility for propelling the bigoted billionaire to the White House. And they say in its self-described Pied Piper strategy, the Clinton campaign proposed intentionally cultivating extreme right-wing presidential candidates, hoping to turn them into the new mainstream of the Republican Party. Well, you definitely succeeded in turning them into the mainstream of the Republican Party, so congrats on that, I guess. But they say in order to try to increase Clinton's chances of winning. And listen, I don't even think that like the underlying narrative here that somehow Donald Trump was the easiest candidate of that field to beat, I don't even believe that. I mean, if Hillary Clinton had gone up against somebody as uninspiring as like Jeb Bush or something like that, and they used this strategy to try to promote Jeb Bush instead of Donald Trump, I think she would have had a better chance of defeating Bush than she would have had in defeating Donald Trump. Because listen, I mean, you know, obviously I despise Donald Trump and all of the policies that he stands for. I mean, he's as corrupt as it gets. He's as right-wing on foreign policy and economics as it gets. But nonetheless, I mean, he had somewhat of an ability to give a populist message and at least use populist rhetoric to pretend as if he was looking out for average Americans. And the same could go for a lot of these Republican candidates, albeit, you know, they're obviously being disingenuous when they use the populist rhetoric, but they definitely could, you know, beat out a lot of these corporate Democrats, especially as the broader Democratic Party is so wildly unpopular right now. But they finish off here saying that the Clinton campaign and Democratic National Committee called for using far-right candidates as a cudgel to move the more establishment candidates further to the right, and Clinton's camp insisted that Trump and other extremists should be elevated to leaders of the pack, and media outlets should be told to take them seriously. I mean, this is exactly what happened during the 2016 election. You had Trump, who was getting all of this airtime. You know, during the presidential primaries, he was the face of the Republican Party. So, I mean, literally this exact strategy that they are outlining here and in this email that they had from WikiLeaks, it's exactly what ended up happening. And then you had Donald Trump and Trumpist Republicans completely take over the Republican Party. So, I mean, thanks Hillary Clinton for not only, you know, running a pathetic campaign and allowing Trump to beat you, which was in and of itself wildly pathetic, but also for helping him get to the position where he could win the Republican primary in the first place. And keep in mind, I mean, we look back on this and it might seem like, oh, Donald Trump easily walked through the Republican primary, but there were times where guys like Ted Cruz were beating him. There were times where Donald Trump was like barely getting a plurality of like 35 to 40% during the Republican primary. So he definitely was somewhat of a beatable candidate back then, but now, I mean, he's completely in control of the entire party, and you know, there's no room for you know, Mike Pence or Liz Cheney's within the Republican Party, definitely not, at least at the presidential level. So again, thank you Hillary Clinton for that entire project. But we have, just to give you an example of when this strategy has actually worked in very rare instances, we had this one from Senator Claire McCaskill, an absolute corporate ghoul, but nonetheless, she did manage to use this strategy, I think back in 2016, to beat this guy Todd Aiken, and it ended up working out for her. But again, you know, we've seen the dramatic failures of this, and we're seeing some even just in the last couple of weeks and months start to develop as a backfire for this strategy that Democrats are trying to use. So here from Politico, they say Democrats boosted a MAGA long shot in the Pennsylvania governor's race. Now he's got a real shot of winning. So they say Mastriano was a MAGA state senator who worked to overturn the 2020 presidential election, and Kolbach thought that he would struggle to win the critical battleground state in the fall, but she's feeling differently these days. And they say in the immediate aftermath of Pennsylvania's messy gubernatorial primary, which included an ill-fated last-minute attempt by the GOP establishment to stop Mastriano, many Democrats and Republicans in Pennsylvania thought the race was all but over. But then Attorney General Josh Shapiro, the Democratic nominee, is a first-class fundraiser with a record of winning tough statewide races, and he emerged unscathed from the Democratic primary after clearing the field. So it seemed somewhat like the strategy could be pulled off. But they continue saying Mastriano, on the other hand, has a shoestring campaign, regularly antagonizes members of his own party, and is known for his far-right views on hot-button issues. They say that he chartered buses to the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, so like not only was in favor of overturning the election, but like actively aided and abetted the insurrection directly by busing people there. That's just absolutely fucking crazy. But they say that that's where he appears to have been a part of the crowd that did cross barricades, and he believes in no exceptions for an abortion ban, so not even in the case of the life of the mother or rape or incest or anything like that. Not that those standards are easily implemented in the first place, but he's not even in favor of usually what is the Republican out or the Republican, easy talking point to push back against abortion bans. So just an absolute freak. But they say he has also said that the state legislature has the power to appoint presidential electors, and as governor, he would have had the power to decertify election machines. So pushing with that independent state legislature theory that we've been talking about on this channel, basically would just allow Republican gerrymandered state legislatures to completely hijack the federal elections process with no checks and balances whatsoever. So that's absolutely wild as well. But they say when Mastriano pulled out a win in the primary, many national Republicans kept their distance and privately assumed that Shapiro would waltz to the governor's mansion. But as the political environment has worsened for Democrats across the country, the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania has begun to look more competitive than either party expected, and now polls show Mastriano behind Shapiro by only 3 or 4 percentage points, which is within the margin of error. And they say, though many still have doubts about Mastriano's ability to run a successful campaign, that has made Pennsylvania Republicans more optimistic and served as a wake-up call for Democrats, particularly in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So, I mean, listen, what the fuck do you expect when you're going around and you're just bolstering a lot of these Republican far-right ghouls in an era right now where you know that the Republican Party is, at least a vast majority of it, controlled by Donald Trump, controlled by the Trump wing of the Republican Party. It's certainly not controlled by the Liz Cheney wing of the Republican Party. So given that context and given the backfiring that we have seen with this strategy being deployed in 2016 by Hillary Clinton and with many other examples as well, why the fuck would you think that this was a good strategy? I mean, they're spending, according here to Open Secrets, they're spending upwards of $44 million so far on advertising campaigns across 5 Republican primaries to boost the profile of far-right candidates in California, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Maryland. So, I mean, listen, we've seen this play out before. Maybe in some races this could be an effective strategy, but nonetheless, I mean, what are you supposed to expect as like an average American seeing Democrats go out and do this crusade against pro-Trump Republicans with the January 6th committee hearings and portraying them accurately, I think at least, as the danger to the country as they actually are, but then simultaneously you're going around and bolstering their chances in the primary when you know that the Democratic Party right now and Joe Biden as the leader of your party is incredibly weak. And this is a moment where we've known for months, if not a year, or at least probably since the beginning of Biden's administration, that Republicans were in all likelihood going to take back at least the House and maybe the Senate. So, I mean, all this is going to end up resulting in is at least a handful of these insane far-right reactionary ghouls who have no ideological framework other than complete fealty to Donald Trump. It's going to result in getting a handful of them in Congress, regardless of, some victories that you achieve along the way. So, I mean, here's your Democratic Party for you right here. I mean, they put more effort into crushing progressive challengers to their, anti-choice Democrats like Henry Cuellar and Jessica Cisneros down in Texas. I mean, they literally put more effort into crushing left-wing opposition than they do into actually pushing back against the danger of the fascist threat to the country that they are screaming about on a day-to-day basis now.